Hi, it's Mayor Walter Sendzik, and welcome back to Our Home with Mayor Sendzik. This is the final episode of 2019. The year has gone by so quickly. There's a lot that's gone on in St. Catharines. And today we have two individuals who are on a daily basis capturing what's going on, not just in St. Catharines, but across Niagara and around the world. We are joined by 610 broadcaster Tom McConnell, as well as from the St. Catharines Standard award-winning journalist Grant LaFleche. And Tom is a veteran broadcaster. You've been with the company Bell Media 10 years now in terms of broadcasting. And
gosh, it feels like 20. That's what it says on my sheet. So
20 years? But 10, broadcaster of both markets in Niagara and London.
In Niagara and London, true.
Right.
15 years doing mid-mornings, and I've just moved to afternoons.
Just what?
Yeah.
Just moved to afternoons?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a whole flip. Now I can get up at a normal hour. Don't have to be up at 5:45.
So Tom,
which
you
is
could
when
talk
Grant's
about
going into bed.
That's right, yeah.
I'm getting up.
There's
and
always that shift.
That's right.
We
So
pass
Tom,
each other in
you
the
could
night.
talk about everything, right?
No.
So anyways, you have a passion for economics.
Sure.
You have a degree is your degree in history or economics?
My degree's in football, but I took economics in school.
Right. And so for the viewers, Tom went to University of Western and he was a middling football player.
That's charitable of you to say. Thank you.
And all due respect, you were an outstanding football player. You actually went to the Vanier Cup and you won the Vanier Cup.
We did.
Which is one of the hardest trophies to win in
25 years
football.
ago, half a lifetime ago officially.
Okay.
We won a Vanier Cup. And I got a degree along the way.
Right.
And somehow I made it into radio without a degree in journalism or broadcasting.
We're like the same.
Yeah.
We're like mirror images of each other.
Well, you do have a
backed into
voice
it.
for radio, just so you know.
Also a face for radio. A voice for the newspaper.
Right beside him is Grant LaFleche, award-winning journalist. Those of you who have been following the Standard know that Grant has been a mainstay of the local newspaper for a number of years. He is originally from Calgary, so
Yes,
he's
sir.
not even from the Ontario media landscape. He
No.
grew up in the Alberta media landscape. We won't go there right now, but he's also a graduate of Bishop's University, which is in Quebec. So you've gone across the country, and
Yes.
again, a football player who played with Bishop's University. So
I was middling, absolutely middling. I was a practice roster guy, and we did not win the Vanier Cup.
well,
We have the same colors as Western,
That's
though.
true.
yes, you do. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are the same colors.
Boy, it is a parallel world.
It is, I know. And I also don't have a degree in journalism. My degree's in political studies and history.
Well, it's interesting that when you are in journalism and you meet a number of people that they don't have that degree in journalism necessarily. They come from a place of passion, whether it's history, it's politics, whatever it is, but they find their way into journalism as a way to
I think our
tell stories.
generation probably that's more common. Like the younger folks, they come through Ryerson or they come through Western. Karina Walter at the Standard, who you talk to often, she has a degree from there. I have an excellent journalism program. But there was a long stretch of time where journalists, either in broadcast or print, didn't have journalism degrees. And I don't know how necessary they are. I think Tom may agree. I mean, the most important thing is to develop critical thinking skills and the ability to analyze data and the ability to assess and report, which is not necessarily what you will learn in a journalism course.
Okay, so I think you've probably lost a lot of listeners there right now.
Yeah.
So we'll go back to, just kidding. But you also in 2018-19 were high watermarks for the Standard.
Yes, sir.
And
Yeah.
for you yourself. You were named top journalist 2018 at the Ontario Newspaper Awards, national award in the community media category for your story in your series in the Standard, All the Chairsmen.
Yes.
The George Brown Award for investigations, again for All the Chairsmen.
Yes.
And a Missioner citation, which was given in Ottawa, the nation's capital.
Wait a second. You were? Was this published? Why do I not know about this?
Don't worry, he's almost done.
All right.
But those are quite an achievement. And when you look at the landscape of media in the country to win these awards, you were up against a lot of different writers and journalists who were covering stories in their own community, and this one rose to the top, and it was All the Chairsmen. And so I guess I just want to ask, just before we get into a bit of a review, what was it like to be recognized for all that work?
It's
on a national and provincial level.
It's a shockingly humbling experience. The two in particular that you named, which is the National Newspaper Awards, which is the George Brown Award for Investigation, and the Mitchners, which is like is Canada's version of the Pulitzer. That's the grand poobah of the whole thing. Did I really just say grand poobah? Yeah. When you're in that company, like you're standing with the best journalists in the country, and you're sort of considered as one of their own, it's a very surreal thing, especially when you're at Rideau Hall, and this is being done by the Governor General and a bunch of us who were there. I mean, the Michener Awards is interesting because it's not kind of, the Ontario Newspaper Awards is kind of the same cast of characters every year. You know, it's the same member newspapers. You tend to see the same faces. The top journalists are kind of always in the mix for awards. Michener's churns a bit. You know, you kind of maybe get 1, 2 if you're lucky over your whole career. Right. Most reporters don't. And we're all standing in line for this procession. It's very formal. And we're all looking at each other going like, what are we doing here? We're all, in our full get up to look as formal as we can. And you're in the setting of Rideau Hall and the Governor General is there and you're being led into the room by a lieutenant. And we all just are like, we're all giggling like little children because we're all like, ha ha ha, look at, we've pulled the wool over everybody's eyes. But what is amazing about it is when you get to sit and talk to those people and you see, despite the pressures that our industry is under in terms of finances and layoffs and newsrooms closing and this kind of thing, that the work that's being done by top flight journalists across this country every day is inspiring, really. And it just, when you look at the stories and, for your viewers, I mean, go to the Michener website, go to the National Newspaper Award website and see what's there and what other journalists are doing in this country to keep folk informed. And it's only newspapers that are doing it. There's nobody else in a position to do it. So it's really kind of it's an inspiring thing. It's a humbling thing. It doesn't, even now, it's sort of over and I've had to move on to other things, but it doesn't really feel real.
Well, it's fitting because the show is about year in review, and that was a high watermark, not just for you, and it was a personal accomplishment, but also for the Standard.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had 2 Michener Awards now. One was in 1986. There was a reporter there named Michael Collins, I think. No, Michael Clarkson. And a couple of other reporters did some work did investigations on Niagara Regional Police, and did some fantastic work then. And just a quick anecdote, if I can keep patting myself on the back before my wrist snaps off. When we were at the National Newspaper Awards for the George Brown Award, that was at the Globe and Mail headquarters, their palatial headquarters in Toronto.
George Brown, founder of the Globe and Mail.
So it's at the Globe building. It's named after the founder of the Globe and Mail. The Standard team was up against a team from the Globe and Mail, and the award was being handed out by the Globe publisher. And so we kind of went to their house and brought the win back for St. Catharines. So it was very cool.
So you've had that award, you've got the Vanier Cup. Right?
Yeah, exactly. We're equivalent. And one of the things, because I sip champagne out of mine, but that's all the story. One of the things that readers, or if you're a reader either in the physical copy or online, may not have an appreciation of, and this is, Grant the newspaper and us on radio, or even in TV, very different mediums in terms of what we produce and the content we create. Our content we create on a daily basis, and that's it. We always joke, are we artisans or are we craftsmen? We're craftsmen. Right. We're cranking it out every day. But the amount of time it takes someone to do a series like All the Chair's Men. So Grant and I talk on a regular basis, and he's like, oh, I'm working on this story, It is just hundreds of hours you probably put into that. We're putting in hundreds of seconds, right? Hundreds of minutes maybe on one story where we're talking to someone live and getting the reaction. The behind the scenes and the thread pulling and looking up the data and going and checking. Maybe people don't appreciate that, how much time it goes in, not just to the average story in a newspaper, but an award-winning story like that. Behind the scenes, I was given a little bit of an insight knowing Grant's work, and it's tremendous how many hours actually go into it. And I don't think people realize it's like, well, you still have to produce other material as well.
Well, yeah.
But the story you did just took so long, and it was so stretched out. And I think that's one of the things I don't know if readers really appreciate, but they should have some insight. It's a long process to do investigative journalism that Grant the Standard did. Takes a long time to do it right and to do it well.
It is. It's not cheap. It's not easy. The Washington Post, just if for those who read the news, just published the Afghanistan papers, which is like the Pentagon papers for 2019 about the war in Afghanistan. And their marketing department was very clever, and they knew this was going to be a big story, so they were already pushing subscriptions on the back of this new series. And the tagline is, your subscription enabled this 3-year investigation. It was 3 years for them to do that. all the chairs minute, which is still ongoing, but we started that in November of 2017 with our first story running in April 2018. So, I mean, often, I mean, it's, I guess, the same in any media. I mean, people don't necessarily see what's happening in the radio station kind of behind the scenes, and it's the same with us. By the time you see that story, you know, a big story, we've been working on it for weeks or months or years in some cases.
So talking about big stories.
Yeah.
So, because I think that was a high watermark for media in our community in terms of the city of St. Catharines and what we've achieved. So and it's interesting because when you take the time to look back over a year, we don't realize until we look at what's been accomplished, how much has it really been accomplished. So in the city of St. Catharines, we had the opening of the first regional housing complex built in our city since 1977. So that's on Carlton Street. Great new building, and it has 84 units for people who were on the waiting list, now have a place to call home. And I remember an individual there who had been homeless prior to moving into this facility. This would have been his first real home in 4 years, and the tears in his eyes. So it does have an impact when we have regional housing, when we have affordable housing, social housing being opened in our community. The GO train service, unexpected. And it was one of those, comes in January, was supposed to be 2021, comes in 2019. That was a surprise for us, and I think the city reacted well with a lot of our developments around it. Canada Summer Games, getting the announcements, and also getting the project underway and getting the funding from upper levels of government. The announcement of the 2024 World Rowing Championships over in Austria. That was another big moment for us because now we got time to prepare for that. And then on the investment side, Heddle Shipyards, formerly the Port Weller Dry Docks, getting that back up and running. No one ever thought that facility would become a working dock again. And it's become a working dock because of Heddle Shipyards. You look at the redevelopment in Port Dalhousie, you got cranes in Port Dalhousie, you've got the cranes in the air down the road from 610, which is the old Hotel Dieu site. You've got the demolition of the former General site. You've got, in downtown St. Catharines, you've got Accenture, a global company, who has moved into Core Block, 500 new jobs there in the Core Block area. So you look at the success of businesses, you look at success for the community, and then you ask yourself, okay, what does it mean from a community perspective? And in the donation that we made last year, in 2019, to Lac Seul, the First Nations up just north of Thunder Bay, where we donated a fire truck to that, and our continued relationship building with our First Nations. Those are all part of sort of what happened in 2019, and unless we take us a pause, because we're all in the media where you keep pushing forward on the next new thing. So from your perspective, I'll start with you, Tom. From your perspective, in 2019, what stood out for you in the form of media that you're in? What stood out for you?
I would think, and go back to, you talked about the two hospital sites getting redeveloped. One is in the demolition stage and one is in the rebuilding stage, but the new hospital has been open 5 years. And so to go back to the point of sometimes stories take a long time, that we don't appreciate that a hospital opens, well, it takes a while to sell the buildings and to get plans in place and to rezone them, then we're going to demolish them, then we're going to rebuild them. So for the Hotel Dieu site, it's been 5 years, and now we see the Seasons Retirement Home coming in. Yep. And when we see that across St. Catharines, where we may see a little pushback or not as smooth as possible, for instance, in Port Dalhousie. Yep. But we see 2 condo developments going forward in Port Dalhousie. We see a project on Ontario Street where we've had some setbacks, obviously, yep. But you see it in the middle, that there's a community starting to renew itself. That a place that had an industrial site for 100+ years is now going to be renewed into sort of an urban village if the vision holds. But then all the other developments that are going on. And so St. Catharines is right in the middle at some big properties that were landmarks, if you will, of renewal, of rebirth. Here's a renaissance going on. And you look at the building, what's the building downtown with the glass? There's one that's undergoing renovation as well.
So which one? The one on the corner of James and...
The one that's all boarded up. The windows are
that's
all boarded
right.
up now?
Yeah.
No, the Welland House.
The
Welland Hotel.
Yeah. So we see this process going on, and I think people, when's that going to be due? When's that going to... In a world of new, in a world of 24-hour news cycles, in a world that so much is digital and can be instantly created, that when we're dealing with physical spaces, it takes a while. And I just see, as you said, the crane is now making a reappearance in St. Catharines in a number of spots that I think, to me, that's the one where we're seeing a community because of The green belt is locking us in. You want to see a denser city. We're not going to build out. We're going to build a little more up. We're seeing, I just think that turnover of land has been really fascinating to watch. It hasn't all been, as you know, perfect. There's been hiccups along the way. There's been delays. There's been lawsuits. But it's all slowly moving forward in terms of a resurgence and especially in and around the downtown core. That's the part I find fascinating, at least.
And it's interesting because you come from outside of the community. So you
Right.
drive in every day.
Yep.
And you get to see it from that perspective. I think it's those of us who live in different parts of the city that maybe not get around a lot, we don't see the development. But when you come in every day, just like if you drive down the QEW and you go through Grimsby, almost every, for the last 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
you drive down QEW and go, oh, there's another building going up. Yeah. Oh, there's another building going up.
When you come in through the 406 and it's like, oh, look, Princess Auto. Right. And when you see the 406 corridor, which is a much more commercial area, but you see that buildup. Thriving communities have vibrant commercial areas. Right. That's just reality. And so people are like, oh, the traffic, that's a bit of the downside. I drive on 4th Avenue. To get to the hospital is not a problem, though. Right. Not many people get delayed. I mean, that whole corridor being developed has been really, positive, I think, for the city of St. Catharines, and you see that change just from the backside, right? You see another new building going up, or you see another little development going up there. So there's an area in the last 5 years, right? Just as the new hospital was built, you see just down the road from the new hospital, Pastone, right? And how that it used to be, Calais has switched hands, but that used to be the only building out there, and now there's a whole development leading up to Calais.
Great. So it's momentum, a lot of momentum taking place. So Grant, from your perspective, because you've been tied up in all the chairs, so we'll get back to that in a few minutes, but from your perspective, what are you seeing, or what's some of the highlights for 2019?
Well, I mean, just to dovetail off that, I mean, I live downtown. I live a couple minutes from the paper over on King Street, and it's interesting because there is this interplay downtown, and I think to me, it is maybe the most important story of downtown St. Catharines. It just doesn't get, I think, the right kind of attention because there's two parallel things that's happening. There's all the development that was spurred, years ago by the Meridian Center and the Performing Arts Center and all the fantastic stuff that goes on there. I mean, when I started here in '98, I started in July '98. There was no, for instance, no celebration of nations. Talk about our relationship with the Indigenous community and celebrating that. There was no theater. There was no big shows or concerts. So that's all, and all the business and the restaurants and stuff that sprung up about the patios bloody on St. Paul Street. Simultaneously, though, and this is one of the, and as you well know, this is one of the challenges that you have to deal with as mayor, that council has to deal with, has been the opioid crisis, the mental health crisis, the homelessness crisis, and unfortunately in the last year, that has now come with some violence. We've had three, I guess, significant shooting incidents in St. Catharines in the downtown area in the last year. And so you have these two kind of parallel worlds that have grown up now beside each other. And to me, trying to look at that and say, how do we reconcile this? How do we deal with these crises at the same time while all this other fantastic stuff is happening simultaneously? And it's really going to be, I think, it's going to be incumbent on this community to sort out, how do we take care of these vulnerable people? How do we protect the people who need to be protected? And how do we ensure, we don't have a downtown nightclub shooting again? So that to me was sort of on a very macro level, that was very interesting to watch. Because we didn't, up until the last couple of years, when did we see cranes and significant construction downtown? Although I think people are so sick of the traffic delays because of said construction, they're going a little bit crazy. Although the QEW South off Ontario Street is finally open again.
It is open.
Thank goodness. But yeah, to me, that, just in terms of downtown St. Catharines, that was, I don't know if highlight's necessarily the right word or what you're looking for, but to me, that was kind of the story out of the heart of the city. Was all this fantastic business development happening in parallel with some really troubling stuff on the side. And I think what is going to define downtown St. Catharines going forward is going to be how is that other half dealt with.
Right. Because it's a year in review. Like you don't shy away from a year in review includes a opioid epidemic. It includes an increase in issues that are connected to homelessness and mental health. And you look at any downtown in Canada, and they're struggling with these kind of social challenges. And it's how you react to it or how you approach the solutions that defines you as a community. Because some communities, and some communities have taken the stand of let's just push out of sight as much as possible. And the focus for us is how do we make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind? And I think that's the point that you're making, is that there's a lot of momentum. It's a lot of positive momentum. But with that positive momentum comes some of the struggles that are associated with people falling behind, falling through the cracks, being invisible in community. And so how are we doing that? And it's by coming up with a homelessness strategy built for zero, which is getting people off the streets as quickly as possible. It's the safe injection site. That to me is a highlight for 2019.
Absolutely.
Is having that open and operating. Those were all positive things, and people would say, well, how is it a positive that you had a safe injection site being opened? It's a positive because the lives that have been saved by having a place from which people can go to have that safe injection, that they self-inject in a safe place where there's a nurse, there's a paramedic, they're all there. It's saving people and bringing people out of addictions.
Well, it's been one of the things that, you and I have had these conversations when I was doing the interview on some of these issues before that was interesting. And you may recall one of the things that when we talked about Queenston Street, which is, I think 2017 or 2018, and you were talking about how the landscaping needs to be done because there were sex trade workers in the area. And if you just kind of mowed down a lot of the older kind of shrubbery and that kind of thing, it would actually put some of these people at risk because they wouldn't be able to kind of escape or hide. They had their own network in a way. And so, that's also part of it, right? Is the city looking at, okay, we're planning to have some of these great economic developments that the city desperately has needed and that has been moving forward. But how are you structuring that to assist the people who, as you say, have fallen through the cracks? Right.
One of the things as well with the attention brought to downtown. So downtown is developed. You now have people coming down to the Performing Arts Center or the Meridian Center that they weren't coming downtown before. So now those downtown problems become more visible. It's not that there necessarily is a huge increase. It's that they become more visible to the people who come downtown. That a lot of the concerts or acts would have gone to Brock or elsewhere. So people
take the 406 all the way around. You don't.
Exactly. The hockey Garden City Arena is at the edge of downtown. That people weren't coming down and making a night, and so people are like, oh, downtown, and I'm like, I think those problems have always been there. And it's more visible to people who are coming downtown to take part in an event. So now it's kind of brought it into the spotlight because people are uncomfortable. Because it's like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what to do. That before, it just wasn't in their vision. That they'd be going to an event or they wouldn't go downtown. Now there's a reason to come downtown. There's also some other things downtown you should be aware of. And so now it's on you and the rest of the community to say, okay, so how do we solve this problem? Now that people have brought it to their own attention, how do we solve it? How do we make this safe? How do we make these people safe in our community?
It's changed, I think, though. Just play devil's advocate. Homelessness has always been downtown. Drugs have always been downtown. There's been crime downtown.
There is an edge to it now, though.
That wasn't there. But I will also, to your point, when I started in '98, the downtown, we used to joke, you walk downtown, it'd be like a tumbleweed, sort of blow down. You were at the chamber at the time. And remember there was that whole period where there were sort of historic downtown shops or people who had been there for 10, 15 years who were just either closing or up and leaving from locations because their windows get broken on a nightly basis. Vandalism was, I know there's been a bit of a rash lately, but it was a huge problem. So those kind of problems, those have largely gone away and they've been replaced by this other thing, which is not unique to St. Catharines. I think to your point, Walter, the opioid crisis is international, right? The mental health crisis is international. We just have to deal with our pocket of it here.
And that's the interesting thing because when you look at the landscape and that landscape informs what's happening, the lower level parking lot, which those who that was the place for a lot of the undercurrents of what was going on, and now that's been replaced with a magnificent spectator sports facility plus the Maryland Eye Walker. So then all of that activity that was taking place is now just risen to other places. So we're dealing with it and wanting to turn the table just a bit. We also had the Netflix series Downtown Harriet, which transformed the downtown, which was an interesting. So what other highlights could you speak to just quickly that you thought was, I didn't think that would happen? For me, Arkell's playing at the Meridian Center, highlight for me. Got to put it. Bryan Adams, another highlight.
Although your competition has him for New Year's Eve, so that's a good thing.
We had him first.
Okay, that's true. That's true. I think going back to the Netflix one was interesting and how it transformed and looked back because a lot of those buildings were preserved. And they were able to set that movie and use, they had some cosmetic changes to the front, but the building and with the corner and it being, I was like, yeah, we can totally transform this street and make it look. And I thought that was really interesting. That, a movie set coming downtown, and for a week, there was a little bit of a Hollywood buzz. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Cool. And then it went away.
You know what's funny about that is, so I train at Fight Fit with Terrence Fowler on James Street, and he's like the, no disrespect, he's like the mayor of James Street, that guy, right? I mean, everybody, he knows everybody. Oh, yeah. And so when that shoot was happening, he had, put out water and stuff, so the actors who were in their heavy woolen outfits could go rest under his awning and have a drink of water and kind of relax. So I go down, and he and I are touring the film area, which is fantastic. If you've seen old photos of downtown St. Catharines, this was a mirror of what it looked like a century ago, which was pretty cool. But because of the way that I dress, I've got the old-timey vest on. I have the fedora.
Were you taken as an extra?
I was. So I'm standing on the corner of James and St. Paul, and I'm just kind of watching them set up for a shoot. And it was brutally hot, and so. One of the handlers and one of the staff for the film are running around with water bottles and sunscreen for folk. And she comes running up to me and she's like, "Oh, you need," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And like I had twice. I was stopped and said, "Are you an extra?" I turned to Terry and went, "I need to update my wardrobe. It's they think I look like I belong in a show from the 18th century. I think I've."
Well, no, you don't. You belong right here and now.
Early 20th century.
But I mean, that was, I think what's interesting about that, because that shoot was successful, the show is successful. I think that we probably will see more of that. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in Calgary, the Olympics was a big thing. There's been nothing here quite that big, but the stuff that you mentioned, the curling, the summer games, that stuff does tend to create a momentum of its own. Right. So if all of this goes off, looking forward into 2020 and 2021, if the games works, if there's no major hiccups, if there's no major, it all kind of happens. You've got things like the shoot. This stuff is going to start happening more and more often. Right. We saw it with the Performing Arts Center. We saw it with the Meridian Center. I think people who are in St. Catharines need to start getting used to the idea that there'll be more eyeballs on this community, there'll be more opportunities to have this kind of thing happen here. That doesn't just happen in Toronto, and it doesn't just happen in Vancouver. It's going to start happening in a place like ours.
And when you look at Toronto, right, the center of the universe, but how much from Toronto, look at filming and look at the art scene and look at the culinary scene 10 years ago in Hamilton. And now you look at slowly coming here. We have a great culinary scene in Niagara, right? Like in St. Catharines, it's fantastic from where it has been. And look at the movies and the TV, so slowly moving out. They're finding locations, they're finding spots. They're like, hey, this would be a great spot for a week or even just a scene, but they're moving. I mean, it's gone from Toronto. It's now, major studios are in Hamilton and then expanding it into Niagara. So we see that natural migration down here, and we look to be poised to take advantage of a lot of momentum.
So, perfect word. So I'm going to end on that one. And I want to thank Tom for coming on. Tom, 6:10. You can hear you on the afternoon show, 6:10.
You can't see me.
And you don't want to see Tom?
2 to 6.
Grant, you can get in the paper, digital and still in print, which is fantastic. And I want to thank you for all the chairs, men. Congratulations for all the awards, very well deserved. And for 2019. So the word of 2019 is momentum. And we've had a great year. And what I want to do is wish you a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and happy Festivus to the rest of you.